What's happening, guys, and welcome to the newest installment of our DevvE AMA series. And today I had the great pleasure of sitting down with Taunt Network and Board of Directors. Now, Bored Apes are arguably the most well-known NFTs probably in history. And unless you've been living under a rock, you definitely know who they are. One of the unique features of the Bored Ape Yacht Club is that every ape owner has the rights to license the IP of their individual NFT. Board of Directors is a group of ape owners who have teamed up to license their IP worldwide, and they work with some of the most well-known brands in the world of retail. Together with Taunt Network, they play a crucial role in the $1 Million Airdrop, and they're working in tandem with the Taunt team to produce Board of Directors Battle World Escape, a game that'll be live on the Taunt platform soon. In this episode, we discussed the $1 Million Airdrop, the genesis of the Taunt Board of Directors partnership, and the extremely innovative ways that they're partnering up to take Web3 to the farthest corners of the globe. This is an amazing talk and definitely something that every crypto and NFT enthusiast can get behind. So stick around, you won't want to miss it.
3, 2, 1, talk to me.
What's happening, guys? My name's Austin, and thanks for tuning in to another one of our DevvE AMA series. And today it is my great pleasure to be sitting down with our old friend Jeff from Taunt Network, as well as Alex Locke from Board of Directors. And Alex, I am stoked to get into your business model, or at least the background of what you guys do, because you are one of the very few companies I've come across that seem to be bridging the world of crypto and, real life in that way. So I'm stoked to hear how you guys are going to be working with Jeff. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Let's do some intros real quick. Alex, we'll start with you, and then we'll kick it over to Jeff.
Sure thing. So my name is Alex Locke, and I am the founder and CEO of NFIP Holdings LLC, the first international NFT IP holding company, which owns our marquee brand, which we're here to talk about today, Board of Directors.
Amazing. And Jeff, for anyone that doesn't know you, and if they don't, well, I feel bad for them, but go ahead and tell them who you are.
Yeah. I bet you the DevvE community is probably getting a little tired of me at this point, but we got so much we need to talk about. But yeah, I'm Jeff from the Taunt Network. We operate a game studio, Taunt Live, the platform, a game Battle World. Alex is, thankfully coming on to talk a little bit about our partnership. That's actually been years now at this point, Alex, in the making. But appreciate the time again to the DevvE community is giving us, and hopefully we can get some valuable nuggets out to the community and really get to understand how big this airdrop we've talked about it really is going to be over the next month or so, and then also Alex is one of the many large partners we're bringing on both into the Taunt Network and into the DevvE blockchain over the next year or so.
Amazing. And Alex, so I want to kick it over to you first. Let's talk about Board of Directors. Can you give me just your elevator pitch? What's the genesis? How did you guys all come together? For somebody that's never heard of you, who are you?
Sure thing. So it was kind of a perfect storm by trade. Actually an IP attorney. And I got my start in brand product licensing. And so I spent my first few years at a law school at a brand licensing agency where I represented large clients and took their iconic IP and brought it from their traditional space into new categories and regions. Great example of that. I was fortunate enough to work on BMW pretty early in my career, and I managed the legal component and deal flow of their entire licensing program. So everything from a collaboration with Kith for apparel, and Puma for footwear, to the die-cast toys and Hot Wheels, if you will, and all the way through video games, whether that be arcade games or platform mobile, etc. So if you were playing a video game that has a BMW automobile or motorcycle in it, there's a high probability I did that deal. Some examples are here. I also represented Viacom. And so if you fast forward a few years after the fact, I was at a large international law firm called Wilkie Farr and Gallagher, where I was in IP and tech transactions group. And about, let's say, 2021, 2022, a lot of our clients, institutional enterprise clients, saw what was happening in the Web3 world and all the money changing hands. And of course, they wanted to get in on it. So my first real deep dive into the world of Web3 and more particularly NFTs was from a legal angle, where I really got under the hood and saw the intricacies that were going on there. And I really needed to understand how they work soup to nuts so that I could provide adequate counseling. And then some interesting things happened after that, whereby, I've been an IP lawyer for some time now, and I'm fairly passionate about it. However, up until very recently, nobody else was. And out of nowhere, I start hearing people saying, I have IP rights, I have this IP rights, like it was this monolithic thing. However, being an IP lawyer is a lot of nuance, and most lawyers aren't even well versed in it. So the term I have IP rights doesn't necessarily mean so much to me, and especially when I started looking at some of the projects, and from what I could see, it appeared there's not, for the most part, a lot of, especially the PFPs, there's not very much intrinsic value. The value is in the artwork and the characters. And so my first gut reaction was there's no way that's the case, because that's kind of counterintuitive to everything we've known about intellectual property and company and brand building for years. Is that's the number one asset that these types of companies protect and are very restrictive. However, I started hearing more and more about it on, in real life, as well as on social media platforms. And when I was particularly drawn to the Bored Apes, obviously due to the celebrities that were involved, as well as the high, multi-million-dollar purchases that were happening. But I was also drawn to the characters coming from the character world. So naturally, I assumed that this was going to be part of a larger product play. And then upon some further research, I saw that it was not. And the light bulb kind of went off for me, whereby this was something that I didn't realize I was working towards my whole life, but it was. And I realized I was uniquely positioned with the relevant expertise, creativity, and network to bridge the gap between the traditional retail manufacturing space and the emerging kooky, if you will, Web3 space. So the first things first was, can I use the artwork, the apes themselves? And so that would fall under copyright law. And so, I geeked out for a while on Yuga Labs' terms of sale. And, it wasn't so clear exactly whether it was an ownership, an assignment, a license, a limited license. But through a lot of analysis, I was able to determine that regardless of what you wanted to call it, there were sufficient rights given to the NFT holder to then commercialize it on products. And so, at that point, I was like, Eureka, I can do this. Lo and behold, that was only one part of the analysis. That was the copyright. Then I started, envisioning, okay, action figures, T-shirts, etc. What am I going to call this thing? And it can't be in a blank box. But Bored Ape is trademarked. I've already got the trademark for Yuga Labs. So I'm like, okay, I could use the apes, but I need to call it something. And so, many people view the law as very prohibitive and force, where good ideas go to die. However, IP law is actually created for the opposite reason. It's to force innovation and create further innovation. And, many people don't know this, but IP rights the right for people to own intellectual property is written in the body of the Constitution. So the right to own your work comes before the right to freedom of speech, which came later in the Bill of Rights. And so the theory there is, if people aren't incentivized, if people can't monopolize and or monetize their creativity, then creativity will stop, because what's the point? And so this is in my opinion, really, really great personification of the law working how it's supposed to, because that forced me to become creative and come up with my own brand. And so in hindsight, had those laws not existed, I probably would have just piggybacked on Bored Ape, and then I wouldn't be distinguished from anyone else. However, it forced me to really get creative and come up with a novel name that kind of spoke to me, was evocative of where it was coming from, but also where it's going. And so I came up with the name Board of Directors, obviously spelled in the same fashion as Bored. Now, going back to my past experience, lawyers are taught to analogize everything, especially with new things. So you look to the past to then predict the present. And one of my clients early on in my career was the NFL Players Association. And so we did the licensing for them. And the NFLPA, as well as a lot of the other sports leagues, players associations, are a unique licensing model whereby sometimes they license the players with the leagues and teams and sometimes on their own. So if you see like the Hulu has live sports commercials, you'll see the players in green. I think Jalen Hurts is on the ads and he's in his green number 2, but you'll notice if you look back now, there's no Eagles insignia and there's no NFL insignia because that's the NFL. So Hulu did a deal direct with the Players Association. Now I knew everyone was seeing these apes everywhere. And so they're identifying with the apes. And then I kind of saw the apes as the players. And then I saw Yuga Lab, Bored Ape Yacht Club as the NFL. And, obviously there are times where, both are great together, but at the end of the day, if there's no players on the field, there's no game. And so I took that model and almost, I guess, if you will, modeled it after that, whereby, we're essentially not so much a union with like labor laws or anything, but sort of from a licensing lens, kind of a collective pooling of individual ape owners or players in the analogy. And then in the same vein, there are with the economics as well, different player associations have different payouts as it relates to licensed merchandising. Some are total rev share, some it's a rev share up until a certain number, and then it's based on individual performance and everywhere in between. And so that part I deferred to the various ape owners, whether they wanted to do it based on their specific apes performance, because we get royalty reports based on SKU. And so we could determine, it'd be a lot bigger pain in the ass to determine that, or whether they want to do a total rev share where it's just you take the total revenue and just divide it by the number of apes. Fortunately, everyone wanted to do the latter, which made my life a lot easier. But that was, kind of the framework I came up with to put this thing in motion.
So I love so much about what you just said. Like, you managed to tie Bored Apes in with the founding fathers in a single sentence, and it made total sense to me. Like, if NYC, if NFT NYC doesn't pull you up for a keynote next year, they have really just ruined their mission. All right, so diving into that a little bit. So you guys are a group of ape owners. You license out the IP for retail products, all sorts of different stuff. And I want to throw your site up on here for a second. And what I want to pull up is Apes in the Wild, because this kind of gives a pretty good idea of, some of the products that can be created using your IP. Now, the question comes in, and for anyone that doesn't know Taunt Network, if by some stretch of the imagination, this is the first time you are seeing Jeff from Taunt Network on your screen, I don't know how that would be the case, but Taunt is working so they're essentially revolutionizing the live streaming industry by plugging in all sorts of data aggregation, working with creators, working with watchers, monetizing Gamblify, all sorts of really, really cool stuff. How does it play in here with, the games that are being developed? How does Board of Directors play in with Taunt Network? And that's for either one of you guys, whoever wants to take it.
I can start first, Alex, if that works. So, like I said, kind of previously, our partnership with Bored Apes actually started a couple of years ago. So, as most of we have the Taunt Network is actually made up of a couple different platforms and products. The one being the streaming stuff that Austin just kind of referenced is Taunt Live. Our game that we're building that uses the Taunt Live platform is actually called Battle World. And the initial idea around Battle World, and some of this might be kind of retracing some of our story for some of the viewers, but in general it might be good for everybody to hear this. But our initial idea around Battle World was to kind of create this world that incorporated our IP, like our original stories, our original characters, alongside of traditional Web2 entertainment IP, whether that's could be anything from like a Marvel character to an MMA fighter to a wrestler, alongside Web3 communities as well, like the Bored Apes or anybody else, right, from that. And so really kind of borrowing a little bit from the Fortnite model, where you can take all of these really cool communities, bring them together into a game or an environment that's really easy for a normal content consumption consumer to understand, and put them in and allow them to have fun and play with the IP that way. So in general, we went out looking for, high-end IP specifically from the Web3 side. And, we ran across Alex and thought, they were probably at the time, and probably still are, the top in understanding how to work these deals. I don't know, Alex, if you remember, it took us a very short period of time to actually knock the deal out, probably less than a month. And for something that, from my background coming from, EA, Amazon, Microsoft, and doing IP deals in the past, and then understanding this complexity around how IPs actually plays with NFTs. And at the time, it was really the wild. I mean, there was much less rigidness around all of this, back then than there even is now. But we both, I think, got the deal done relatively quickly because we both kind of understood where this could go, left a little bit of leeway for things that could potentially happen, and and then came up with a model that potentially works for both of us. So I think from that perspective, again, I don't think we're talking enough about this, but I do believe this is the first third-party game that Bored Apes are actually being used live in. That's outside of a Yuga-based a directional game or produced game. And so I do think it's a really big milestone for Web3 gaming and how NFTs are being used in gaming and can be used as a playbook moving forward.
Amazing.
No, that's true. And I remember working through the contract with you several years ago, very vividly, actually, because it was such a novel. Now, if you fast forward to today, it seems so simple. Oh, you had the IP and you licensed it. And, there's examples to look to, but at the time there were none, and that was us. And so, a lot of times, some lawyers, oftentimes both lawyers and people, when they think about lawyers, think that going into a contract negotiation, the goal is to beat the other side or pull one over on them. And that's certainly not the case, and especially not the case if you want to, when it comes to licensing. It really truly is a partnership, and the ultimate win-win, when done correctly, the ultimate win-win endeavor. So fortunately, both Jeff and myself came from the right backgrounds, and we're open to learning from each other and kind of setting a precedent for a new model that didn't exist. And so we truly worked together to make sure both of us were both protected and stood to gain from the relationship. So to Jeff's point, we were able to kind of knock out this really unprecedented type of model and agreement that really didn't exist, that, if it hasn't already, I certainly think will pave the way for a lot of the way deal making is done going forward.
Incredible. So what is this going to look like in actual practice? Could you speak to what this is really going to look like?
Yeah. So the cool thing is, when we're kind of talking about announcing it today, that Board of Directors is actually one of our first actual real IP partner that we're actually putting into the airdrop as part of the Battle World Underground. So what the Battle World Underground is part of our $1 million Taunt airdrop, is basically a collection of mini games that people can play that are all derivatives and have separate narratives outside of the greater Battle World ecosystem. But all of those mini games play into storytelling around our characters and all of those things. And so what we wanted to do is really use this opportunity to use this great kind of Board of Directors IP as our first IP that we're using in one of our mini games. So basically, we created a game called Board of Directors Escape from Battle World. So we're combining Battle World with the Board of Directors IP and putting them in the game. And as part of that, playing that mini game with our other partner, Pipeflare, you can earn what we call our experience points. And those points can then be used to redeem Taunt tokens when the time is right, later down the road. And so again, for us, this is actually a precursor to what Alex and I's original deal was eventually there will be an NFT drop with the board of directors as playable characters and fighters within Battle World. And we actually have a handful of those characters already done and things like that. We're just waiting for the right time to really start to release that. But now that we've had a little bit of time, kind of to think about how to do that execution and things like that, we're pretty pumped with some of the ideas what we have. But in general, we're hoping that this is just kind of a jump off and a great way to show the world really how the IP can be used in Web3 games, and then move that to a more traditional NFT release model, by the end of the year.
So I am so intrigued by this. As somebody who went way down the NFT rabbit hole in 2021 because, money was cheap and everyone was balling. The amount of projects that actually make it to the point of licensed IP, I mean, I cannot even fathom how small of a number that actually is. I think I have 100 different NFT projects sitting in a wallet somewhere and they're all worthless. So like to see this actually happening in real life practice, not just what you guys are doing, Alex, but integration in a custom game, like that is absolutely rad. And I would imagine like this has got to be something that the ape community is like really behind. Am I right to assume that?
You are. At the time there was a lot of skepticism. A lot of people were of the belief that who would want to buy or play with or wear somebody else's ape? That's like wearing somebody else's t-shirt, or whatnot. But again, going to a sense of common theme, going back to the way my brain works with analogizing, I kind of saw a lot. I kind of saw a lot of parallels between some of the mentality at the time with like cultish Web3 community, but also clamoring for mass adoption. And so those two were kind of at odds with each other. And so I kind of saw a lot of similarities between that and rapid hip hop in the 90s, where it was seen if you went beyond the mixtape level or the rap battle level and went on mainstream airwaves, that was kind of selling out. However, how else do you get your message and voice out there and get both a larger audience and B, revenue? And so that didn't really deter me like it did, I would say, a lot of other projects. But also coming from the branding world, I knew that the brand needed to stand on its own two legs and have a meaning. And so I knew that the hype and the visibility from the apes themselves could certainly get my foot in the door and open conversations. But there really needed to be a larger strategy and brand and messaging behind it in order for it to go anywhere and have any staying power. And so combining that with also an understanding of market segmentation, and being honest with myself and the brand. And, everyone thinks their brand is some luxury brand, a Louis Vuitton. And, some are, but also, oftentimes the luxury brands are loss leaders, and then they're sub brands that are at mass that actually drive the brand and make the money. And so while some of our products are more prestige, I really wanted to appeal to the everyday person. And for for NFTs, their values solely derive from secondary market, which solely means it's based on what other people think of it. And what better way to improve the value than to have people who never even heard of NFTs wanting to wear and represent your brand and gain exposure. But also, there's no bigger, in my opinion, there's no bigger compliment to a brand or a singer, a celebrity, whatever, than somebody wanting to wear you and then almost say, this is a part of me and represents who I am and how I feel. And so combining all those elements and also adding the kind of Bored Ape, and also, of course, you have to stay true to the original ethos to a large degree. But the board messaging and kind of being aloof and not giving a crap is so relatable to so many people, and kind of combining all of those elements into a brand and a voice that speaks to people that maybe the token doesn't, but it does. And so I think kind of combining all of those elements with my background is kind of what set it apart. And, and circling back is a really niche, complicated area that, is unrealistic that everyone who owns IP is going to be able to monetize it, and same thing with, decentralization is great for a lot of components with Web3 and certainly the future. However, for a lot of commercial activity and particularly licensing, you need some centralization. You need a central source of truth that can approve product samples, broker the deals. Otherwise, you're going to have 100 talking heads saying, I want this, I want that. And at the end of the day, you need to all be on the same page, but you need some centralization. to a degree to get deals done and make them successful.
Yeah, and to kind of tack onto that, I would say this, like, think about, and again, I'm just going from our small studio standpoint. Think about if, for example, the Bored Apes got so big that EA wanted to make a game around them, right? It would be literally impossible for them to go one by one to 10,000 people and sign an individual IP deal with them, or it takes so long, or it would be so daunting. The deal would be dead in the tracks, right? The great thing that Board of Directors does, it made it easy for us specifically to get a handful of quality people with the same vision, really, around let's make a cool product, let's do something that's really cool for the for our community, but then let's make a little bit of money at the same time and have that same kind of mindset. And make it that simple for us to do that. So, again, back to kind of Alex's point around, there has to be some centralization in a world of decentralization when we're talking about, kind of combining real world products and how, probably a Walmart operates. That's another great example. There's no way Walmart's going to go around and sign 100 deals with 100 different, Bored Apes owners, right? And so, when Alex can kind of bring that to the table with his background and say, hey, here, this is what we'd like to do. And, here's how we would like our products to look. And they can easily say, hey, that's a great idea. That deal doesn't come without a linchpin of centralization and somebody who has enough savvy to make that go, right? With an entity as big as a Walmart, for example. So I think a lot of these things, and then kind of moving it back to the gaming side, is where the easiest translation for a lot of these PFP communities really is gaming. And you're seeing it across the board, right? Is that how can they grow their communities? How can they monetize the IP? How can they monetize the brands? All of that is going to have to come with some level of sophistication, some level of being able to centralize or potentially trust a partner like Alex to do it for you. But in general, if that's where most of these groups want to take it, I think the playbook we're building right now is something that can be looked at and taken in and used over and over again.
And you know what I found so interesting? I completely agree with that, Jeff. And Alex, so when you were talking, you mentioned, people using them as PFPs and like, why would you want to represent someone else's ape? And, notwithstanding the mutants, let's assume we're not taking the mutant apes into account here. You've got only 10,000 of them out there. And if I were to step back and take a look at the NFT scene, and, people might throw tomatoes at me for saying this, but I would definitely say that the apes are the 4 leaders, right? They're the guys that are out front. And taking a look at some of the pictures that you had on your website from apes in the wild, and there's, obviously billions of people in the world, but for a certain generation, the generation I have kids in, right? When they put an ape on their shirt, it's saying something different. Like, for instance, Louis Vuitton has convinced my wife that a $4,000 purse is a really good idea. That's marketing. That's status. It's whatever message it means to her is what it means. And if it's worth $4,000, then it's worth $4,000. But having an ape on some piece of clothing or in a game, it has a message there, and the message is pretty solid at the moment. So I totally see where you're going with this, especially for this new generation that's going to come up that is way outside of the 10,000. And so that's absolutely rad that you guys are doing that. I love it. So tell me, how does the airdrop, like, I know that you've got the game going, Jeff. Is there an airdrop that's happening for like board of directors or ape holders or something of that nature? Excuse my ignorance, but
so again, on the airdrop side of things, the board of directors is directly integrated in that first game itself. Mm-hmm. I think overall, as we construct the multiple phases of the airdrop that's going to go through over the next 4 weeks, 6 weeks, potentially longer, there is going to be opportunities for pockets of communities to earn specific rewards and really cool things and things like that. I think specifically with the board of directors and, with the Bored Apes community itself, I think where we're going to really be able to target some really cool activations on the digital side is when we do the actual NFT drop itself. I think that's where we're put a lot of our guns into, okay, what can we do that's really, really cool to activate the Bored Apes community into using the board of directors IP into Battle World, and what does that look like on the gaming side? So think about branded arenas, think about special tournaments, think about special NFTs outside of the fighters that you can only get with ownership of a Bored Ape. All of those things I think we've been stewing on for a year and a half or so, since the partnerships are 2 years. And so, that's where we're going to focus on how do we make this a much bigger deal. But like I said, the really cool thing is over over the next few weeks or whatnot, hundreds of thousands of, airdrop participants are going to be exposed to the Bored Apes community if they haven't been already. Definitely the board of directors, right, as part of that. And then hopefully they're coming back and they're checking out what Alex is doing, maybe putting new blood into the Bored Apes community. And that's how we're looking at it, is like, how can we be a positive value add across all these communities and IP deals we're doing for Battle World specifically. And then, with that reciprocal kind of outlook on that, then hopefully their communities feel comfortable with our communities and we continue to grow organically that way.
Absolutely incredible. So, Alex, for anyone that's never heard of you before, how can people get in contact? How can people support? What are your socials? What's your website? Things like that.
Sure thing. So on LinkedIn, I'm Alex Locke. On Twitter, I am Web4Lawyer Guy. On Instagram, my personal handle is Alvin_Locke. The reasoning behind that is I'm a triplet, and in college, my nickname is Alvin from Alvin and the Chipmunks. And Instagram first came out when I was in college, and I thought it would be like Snapchat, where it's like inside jokes. And so that's what I made it, because that was my nickname at the time. And then, had I known Instagram would become the next Facebook, I probably would have made it Alex, but the train already left the station. And then Board of Directors is on Instagram as boardofdirectors.xyz and on Twitter as NFIP Holdings.
Amazing. And Jeff, so for anyone that's not following your socials, you guys have a massive airdrop coming up, and I cannot scream it loud enough that people need to follow you. Would you please give them your socials as well, so people know what the heck's going on?
Absolutely. You can follow Battle World at Play Taunt on Twitter, and then you can follow what's going on with the token at Taunt Coin.
Amazing. And guys, if you don't have your DevvE staked, make sure you're staking it at DevveLaunchpad.io. That's how you are going to get into the presale for the Taunt token. Gentlemen, Alex, Jeff, thank you so much for being here. Alex, it is such a pleasure to meet you, man. I got fired up hearing about your business. It's rad. Absolutely rad.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me. Look forward to hopefully staying in close contact.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, guys. Catch you guys in the next one.